I can think of nobody better on the cutting edge, truly on the cutting edge, to be the perfect person tonight to lead us into a conversation about our ongoing fight for democracy. We won't give up, and with you as our leader, we are so lucky to be strong and to be fighting back. Thank you for being with us tonight, City Attorney David Chiu. It's our great privilege to have you back at Sherith Israel.
Shabbat Shalom. Thank you, Rabbi, for that very kind introduction, and to all of you for the warm welcome to being in this incredible institution that you call home. And I'm particularly honored to be here as someone who is not Jewish. I grew up with a very classic San Francisco religious upbringing. I am the son of a Buddhist father, the son of a Protestant mother, schooled by Catholic priests, but most importantly, by 4 Jewish college roommates. And I think it is really fitting. I love the fact that you have blessed your next generation as they go off to college. And I was thinking about my Jewish roommates who taught me so many things. They taught me about some of my most favorite Jewish foods. They taught me about the concept of Tikkun Olam. They brought me to my first High Holidays services, which back then in college really meant they were coming back to the synagogue occasionally, truth be told, because they were looking for dates. But one of the things, or the number of things that I learned from them was really what drew us together. We spent a lot of time talking about the commonalities between our communities, and certainly as a Chinese son of immigrants, we learned how much we had in common. How on Christmas, we all eat at the same restaurants. How no matter how much we accomplish in our lives, our mothers, Chinese and Jewish, would always say that we failed them because we didn't become doctors. And how much in common we have in this month of May, which is both Asian Pacific Islander Heritage Month and Jewish Heritage Month. And they would often tell me, Chiu, you may not be Jewish, but you are Jewish, so that's okay for us. But there was one thing that we often talked about that was very serious that both of our communities had in common, and that was being strangers in a strange land and often experiencing hate. During the first Trump 1.0 era, our country saw tremendous spikes in hate and bigotry against our immigrants, our LGBTQ community, African Americans, our Muslim community, and the communities that you and I represent. All of you know of the incredible disturbing rise in anti-Semitism and violence, particularly after October 7th. After Donald Trump blamed COVID on the Chinese virus and Kung flu, we saw a pandemic spike of literally thousands of anti-Asian incidents. There was a report that came out last year called Anti-Semitism and Democracy, which warned that anti-Semitism was not just about hate against the Jewish community, about how it reflects really a signpost of deeper threats to democracy, often side by side with efforts to centralize power, restrict civil liberties, and scapegoat those who are marginalized. And this is the topic I want to cover tonight in your 5th Democracy Shabbat. I want to start with a concept in the Torah and in the Bible, which is that of welcoming the stranger. You know the story, you've heard it since you were children, the story in Genesis when Abraham sees 3 men who he does not know in the middle of a hot day. He invites them into his home. He washes their feet. He feeds them food and drink. And it turns out that they're angels sent by God who will tell him that his wife Sarah will soon have a child. And we know that the lesson in that story is that any stranger that we meet could be God, and that we must treat strangers in that way. But I will tell you, that idea of treating those who you don't know as your family, of welcoming strangers in a strange land, that is a value that America has forgotten at this moment. We've just experienced the most disturbing 100 days of the beginning of a presidency in U.S. history. So many rights being trampled, immigrants and citizens being deported, a culture war against transgender kids, diversity, equity, inclusion turned into the three most controversial words in the English language. Abortion rights being even further eviscerated. But let me tell you one thing that all of this has in common. The Trump administration is targeting the stranger, the other. They envision a society that is segregated between us and them, demonizing those who are the others. And if there's one lesson that all of our faith traditions share, is that we love strangers as ourselves, a lesson that has been lost as they come after the strangers. Trump advisor Steve Bannon was asked about the strategy during this second administration, and he referenced the phrase muzzle velocity, the rapid firing of bullets on a target, spraying shots at civil society and the federal government every day, overwhelming, flooding the zone. He said they, referring to us, would only be able to defend one or two things at a time, and that they would hit their targets. Let me give you a sense of this pace from the perspective of my office as your city attorney. So during the first Trump 1.0 administration, my office sued the administration 10 times in 4 years. We were on the cutting edge. In the first 100 days, we've brought 6 lawsuits, literally 8 times the speed of defense, given the pace of his constitutional blitzkrieg on our rights. I was thinking about the 6 lawsuits that we brought in the first 100 days, and I've realized all of them are about how we defend members of our community who are considered strangers to them. For them, they are the other. First are immigrants. Donald Trump decided to target sanctuary cities. He's telling folks that cities like San Francisco are harboring criminals who are immigrants. That is a lie. That could not be farther from the truth. And by the way, we literally tell the Trump administration every day who we house in our jails. We send them fingerprints. If they want to pick up someone who they think is actually a criminal, all they have to do is bring us a criminal warrant or court order. We would do that. There is nothing in sanctuary policies that impede lawful federal immigration enforcement. But what is our sanctuary policy about? It is about building trust between strangers. It is about promoting public safety between communities and law enforcement, because we know that when immigrant communities trust police officers, they will step up as victims and witnesses in crimes. The real bad guys will be arrested. We are safer. And this is why hundreds of cities across our country, this is why hundreds of law enforcement police chiefs and officials support sanctuary policies. But this is what we are defending at this time. Another lawsuit. When Donald Trump targeted our LGBTQ community, he decided his administration would simply erase 80,000 web pages and data sets, health data, on the websites of the National Institutes of Health, Centers for Disease Control, the Food and Drug Administration, data that we need for doctors to keep us alive, for public health departments to keep us healthy. We had to sue in that area. A third target, kids of color. A couple weeks ago, they sent us a letter saying they were going to remove our funding that pays for AmeriCorps staff in our schools, dozens of folks who are addressing equity issues, at-risk kids who are at risk of flunking out in our schools. They wanted to end that funding. Folks who are unhoused, our homeless neighbors, Literally 2 weeks ago, we got yet another letter from the Trump administration saying that they were going to cut off $50 million of funding to San Francisco that helped keep almost 2,000 of our neighbors housed at night. The other. He's targeted federal workers in the largest dismantling of the federal government in the history of our country. Elon Musk treating 250,000 federal workers as the other. And the last lawsuit we brought was to protect birthright citizens who were born in our country to immigrant parents. The 14th Amendment was passed right after the Civil War, almost 160 years ago, and it said if you're born in this country, you are a citizen. And a couple years later, there was a Chinese American who was born in Chinatown. He went back to visit his parents, and when he came back in the late 1890s, the then federal government said, you're not a citizen. He fought his case all the way up to the Supreme Court, and 157 years ago, the Supreme Court held that if you were born here in the United States, the 14th Amendment controls. Just yesterday, I was in Washington, D.C., 7 a.m. in the morning, 10 a.m. East Coast time, at the Supreme Court as they were considering whether the Trump administration could, within one stroke of Donald Trump's pen, eliminate birthright citizenship. I stand in front of you as a birthright citizen. I suspect many of you here are also birthright citizens. He's talking about literally eradicating an entire generation of babies who will become young adults, who will live in our communities without the rights of citizenship, but they will have actually no rights to be in any other country. They will be literally stateless. They won't be able to go to school, to vote, to work, to get health care, to travel. The other. Now, let me tell you one good thing about this. In these first 6 lawsuits, in the first 100+ days, in the first rounds of all these lawsuits, we have won. San Francisco has won. But obviously, that is not enough. And I want to note that Donald Trump is targeting these folks not just because he treats them as the other, but he wants to distract us from the 3 things he is not doing. He is not fixing our economy. He is enriching himself and his oligarchy. And this is what I want to focus on, he is dismantling our government and our democracy. I recently read a terrifying book of nonfiction called When Democracies Die, because we often think of authoritarian regimes that come to power at the end of a gun after violent coups. But political scientists, in this case Stephen Levitsky and Daniel Ziblatt, they document how in recent decades so many modern democracies have died without a single shot being fired when an autocrat takes power through one illegal act at a time, through the subtle erosion, the quiet dismantling of democratic institutions. The book describes the 4 signs of a growing autocracy. When a head of state, 1, rejects the democratic rules of the game. 2, denies the legitimacy of his political opponents. 3, tolerates violence. And 4, is willing to curtail civil liberties. Now, this book was published in 2018, but if you read it, all the signs are there. When people don't realize what is happening, believing that we still live in a democracy. This was 1930s Europe. This was 1970s Latin America. This was Asia in recent decades. I think a lot these days about a poem from World War II Germany that I suspect all of you know. First, they came for the socialists, and I didn't speak up because I wasn't a socialist. And then they came for the trade unionists, and I didn't speak up because I wasn't a trade unionist. And then they came for the Jews, and I didn't speak up because I wasn't a Jew. And then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. I think if this poem was written today, it would read something like this. First, they came for the immigrants and the birthright citizens, and then the LGBT families and the trans kids, and then they came for the federal workers and the scientists and the universities and the media, and then the lawyers and the law firms, and then Obrego Garcia and Judge Hannah Dugan, all in the first 100 days. As far as I know, we still live in a democracy, but there is so much that is happening that is illegal, that is authoritarian. So what do we do? Last week, I was with a few friends of mine who are attorney generals around our country, and we spoke about 3 things that we need to do at this moment, and they all start with the letter C, so it's easy to remember. Courts, crowds, and courage. I've already been speaking about the courts, but at this moment I'll just point out the obvious, that our executive branch or legislative branch are held captive, and so the only independent branch of government is the judiciary. There have been over 200 lawsuits filed in the first 100 days. Many have seen early victories, which is slowing him down. Judges across the political spectrum, including Trump-appointed judges, are doing the right thing. I mentioned the 6 cases that we have brought and winning the first round in all 6 of those cases. I am proud of the lawyers that I work with. I chair the Civil Prosecutors Coalition in the state of California. It's the largest city attorney and county council offices in the state. You should know we are all engaged in this fight around the country. But if you think about it, 200 lawsuits divided by 100 days, that's about 2 Captain America shields that we're putting up every day against the dozens of shots that he is taking against society. We could literally file 10 times as many lawsuits. There is a lot of work to be done. In cities across America, every day, they're receiving multiple letters that are violating the Constitution, stripping billions of dollars of federal funding from cities like San Francisco. At this moment, we need to continue to fight in the courts. But let's talk about what those of you who are not lawyers can do when it comes to crowds. We need to organize. At a time when people are feeling fearful and helpless, we have to come together. And I'm going to tell you, it's not just about physical crowds and rallies. We have to overcome the collective action barriers that we see. Democracy doesn't work when we sit alone in our homes, deciding we can't do anything, deciding not to read the news, and deciding we're just going to turn on Netflix, watch the game. Even if most Americans don't agree with Donald Trump, he will win if fear and helplessness takes us all. It's hard for anyone to stand up against a bully. I see this in my own profession. Donald Trump in the last couple weeks dragged some of the most successful lawyers in our country into his office. He told him that their law firms would not win business unless they gave him $100 million in free legal services. If I told you that if you wanted business with my office, you had to pay me $100 million, you might think that would be called corruption. But in Trump's world, that is good business. 9 of the largest law firms in our country bent the knee and have committed almost $1 billion of resources to him. But I'm going to tell you, if you give in to a bully today, what is he going to do tomorrow? He's going to hit you again. We know, on the other hand, that bullies stop when we all stand up. And so I tell my friends in law firms, if we stand together, we protect the rule of law. I tell my friends at universities, if they stand together, they protect academic freedom. If news organizations stand together, we protect the freedom of the press. And so I tell you, in whatever community you are in, if you stand together with others in your ranks, you protect each other. Let me end with courage. Dr. King reminded us that our measure as human beings is not where we sit in moments of convenience. It's where we stand in moments of controversy and challenge. And as Harvey Milk once said in our city, I'm here to recruit you into this fight. This is how we overcome collective action. We have to organize not just the crowds, but we have to speak out. We have to step up. We've got to write that op-ed. We've got to challenge what's happening. We need to be a spark. We have to be an example to others. We need to push back. So I'm here really to ask each of you, what are you going to do in this moment? We think about what we might have done in 1930s Germany. what we might have done at any moment in our history during those civil rights days, this is that moment in our lifetime when we have to stand up. When we have to stand up and ask ourselves, what does real democracy look like? And I would say, I think real democracy looks like courage. It's the courage to stand up for our democracy. It's the courage to stand up for the values of whatever faith you ascribe to. It's the courage to stand by each other, and it's the courage to welcome and to love the stranger. Shalom Shabbat.